Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. The house was built in 1934, which the realtor mentioned as a selling point in the way realtors mention age, when the house has held up well enough that age becomes character rather than liability. Good bones, she said, which is what they say when the structure is sound and the cosmetics are negotiable. She was right about the bones. The foundation was solid. The roof had been replaced within the decade. The plumbing was updated enough to be functional without being new enough to be reliable. I bought it for what it cost and what it would cost to make it comfortable, and the math worked out the way the math on older houses sometimes does if you're willing to do the work yourself. I moved in on a Saturday in late September and spent the first 2 weeks in the practical absorption of settling, unpacking, and cleaning, and assessing what needed immediate attention versus what could wait until I'd recovered from the financial impact of buying the place. The house was 3 bedrooms on 2 floors, with an attic accessed by a pull-down stair in the upstairs hallway. I went up there on the 3rd day to assess the storage situation and found the usual density of a long-occupied attic, boxes and furniture, and the accumulated objects of previous owners who left things behind, organized in the loose way of people who stored things they didn't need but weren't ready to discard. I heard the first sound 11 days after I moved in, a Thursday night, somewhere after midnight, from directly above the bedroom ceiling. Movement, the kind that suggested weight and intention rather than the skittering lightness of a mouse or the thump and scrabble of a squirrel. Heavier than either of those and more deliberate, a shifting of position, the sound of something adjusting itself in a space it occupied as a matter of residence rather than transit. I went up the following morning with a flashlight and found nothing. No animal, no droppings, no nest, no point of entry I could identify in the eaves or the roofline. What I found instead, in the far corner of the attic, away from the stacked belongings of previous owners, was a section of floor that had been cleared and maintained with a care that didn't match the general state of the attic. An open space, roughly 6 feet square, the floorboards swept clean, the edges of the space defined not by any physical barrier but by the quality of the clearing itself, deliberate and attended to in a way that read as intentional rather than incidental. In the center of that cleared space, there was a ceramic bowl, old, plain, undecorated, the kind of thing that might have come with the house in 1934 and stayed because nobody thought to move it. It was empty and clean in the way of something recently washed rather than long unused. I picked it up and turned it over and set it back where it had been and went downstairs and told myself it was a previous owner's quirk and moved on. The sounds continued. Not every night, not on any schedule I could identify in the first weeks, just periodically. The weight and deliberateness of something repositioning itself in the attic space above my bedroom. I bought traps, the humane kind, baited them with peanut butter, placed them at the perimeter of the attic, checked them every morning. They were undisturbed each time, bait intact, mechanisms unsprung. positioned exactly as I had left them. After 3 weeks, the character of the sounds changed. The first phase had been nocturnal, which fit an animal pattern even if the specifics didn't. The second phase had no pattern. The sounds came in the afternoon and the early evening, and once in the middle of a workday when I was in the house on a call and had to mute my phone while I sat listening to the ceiling and tried to determine whether what I was hearing was escalating or simply less bounded than it had been. It was less bounded. The sounds moved through more of the attic rather than staying in the area above the bedroom. They had an exploratory quality, methodical, covering the space in a way that felt like inventory. The food disappearance started in the 4th week, and I missed it for longer than I should have because it was small and consistent in its smallness. The back of the refrigerator, the bottom shelves, things I'd bought and not immediately used, a portion of something left over, a piece of fruit past its best, items at the margin of freshness. I first noticed it when I went to use something I was certain I had and found it gone, and then noticed it again when the same thing happened 2 days later. And then I started paying attention and found that paying attention confirmed it as a pattern rather than forgetfulness. Something was taken from the kitchen, modest amounts, things that could be taken without immediate notice, the kind of taking that suggests awareness of detection thresholds, an understanding of how much a person would notice, and a discipline about staying beneath it. I'm a practical person. I want to be clear about that because the way I responded to this information matters. I didn't immediately construct a supernatural explanation. I considered the practical ones, a person with access to the house, a problem with my own memory, a pest situation more sophisticated than I'd been giving it credit for. I checked the locks, I changed them, I put a camera in the kitchen. The kitchen footage showed nothing. No person, no animal, no disturbance of any kind that corresponded to the missing items. The items continued to disappear. I found the name of the previous owner through the county assessor records, which are public and which gave me a chain of ownership going back to the original construction. The most recent previous owner was a woman named Cora Vane, who had sold the house 7 years before I bought it. It took me about a week of searching to find a current address for her, a retirement community about 40 miles from Harwich, and another week of deciding before I drove out there. She was in her late 70s, sharp and self-contained, and when I told her where I was calling from in the lobby, she looked at me with an expression that I'd come to recognize in the course of the various strange situations I'd been in since buying the house. The expression of someone who has been expecting a particular kind of conversation for a long time. She took me to the common room, and we sat in chairs by a window, and she folded her hands in her lap and said she'd wondered sometimes how long it would take whoever moved in after the last sale to come find her. I described what had been happening. The sounds, the cleared space in the attic, the bowl, the food disappearing from the kitchen. She listened without interrupting and without surprise, and at the end of it, she nodded once in the way of someone receiving expected information. And then she told me the attic had a tenant. That was the word she used, tenant, which she'd chosen over the years as the most accurate available word for the arrangement. It had been there when she bought the house, which had been explained to her by the owner she'd bought from, a man named Pelham who'd lived in the house for 22 years and who had maintained the arrangement throughout without incident. Pelham had explained it to her as a condition of the property rather than a problem with it, the way you disclose a well that needs seasonal attention or a basement that requires a sump pump in wet years, something that came with the house and that the house required you to manage. The arrangement was simple. Food left in the bowl in the cleared space, in the attic, on a specific schedule that Pelham had passed to her and that she had maintained for the full 17 years she'd owned the house. The schedule was tied to the season, more frequent in the colder months when she understood the need was greater, less in the summer. The food itself was not specific. Pelham had told her it wasn't particular, just that it needed to be adequate and regular and left in the bowl in the cleared space. I asked her what it was. She said she didn't know precisely and had decided early on that not knowing precisely was compatible with the arrangement and preferable to the alternative. She said she had been in the attic at night on one occasion, trying to understand better what she was sharing the house with, and that she had seen enough to confirm that the tenant was real and physical and present, and that she had come downstairs and not gone back up at night again, and had found that the arrangement worked fine without that level of detail. I asked what she'd seen. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said large. She said it was large and in a way that the attic accommodated rather than constrained, which she'd found more unsettling than if the space had been too small for it, because a thing that fits the space it's given has been there long enough to have settled into it. She said she'd seen it in the low light of the attic as a shape and an impression rather than a set of details, and that the impression had been enough. I asked why she hadn't told the buyers when she sold the house. She was quiet again for longer. She said she'd told the realtor, who had told her that disclosing something like that would make the property unsellable, and had suggested she let the new owners figure it out. She said she'd accepted that recommendation because she was 71 and tired, and the house was more than she could manage alone, and she'd told herself that whoever moved in would figure it out quickly enough. She said she had thought about that decision regularly in the 7 years since. She didn't say she regretted it, and she didn't say she didn't. I drove home and went directly to the attic. I stood in the cleared space with the ceramic bowl in my hands, and I thought about the bowl being clean rather than dusty, which meant the tenant had been cleaning it in the absence of anything being put in it, maintaining the space and the vessel on its end of an arrangement that I hadn't been holding up on mine. 7 years of the previous owner's maintenance, and then the sale, and then the gap between owners, and then me. 11 months of me in the house without knowing. The kitchen margin substituting for the arrangement at a level that was apparently adequate until the season shifted and adequate became insufficient. I went to the kitchen and put together what I had that seemed appropriate, not specific. Cora had said it wasn't particular, just adequate. I put it in the bowl and carried it to the attic and set it in the center of the cleared space and went back downstairs. The sound stopped within the hour, not gradually, not the tapering quiet of something settling, an immediate and complete cessation of sound from the attic that was as deliberate in its absence as the knocking sounds had been in their presence. One moment, there was the low, irregular movement from above, and then there was silence of the specific quality that follows acknowledgement rather than the silence that follows departure. I sat in the living room and listened to the silence for a long time. That was 8 months ago. I've maintained the arrangement since, the schedule Cora described, adjusted for season the way she'd explained. The bowl in the cleared space on the floor of the attic. I go up during the day to refill it, and I don't go up at night, which is a boundary I've established and maintained without testing it, because some boundaries are better untested. The house is quiet. Not the strained quiet of a place holding its breath, but the settled quiet of a house that is operating within its own terms, which is a different thing, and which I've come to appreciate rather than unsettle. The food in my kitchen stays where I put it. The sounds above the bedroom are gone. What's in the attic is doing whatever it does in an attic that has housed it for longer than I've been alive, in a space that fits it the way a settled thing fits its space. And the arrangement holds because I'm holding up my end of it. I've thought about what it means to own a house that you don't entirely own. The deed has my name on it, and the taxes come to my address, and by every legal and financial measure, the property is mine. But there is something in the attic that has been in this house longer than any human owner, and that has outlasted all of them, and that will, by the logic of what I've come to understand, outlast me too. The house belongs to me in the way that the surface of an arrangement can belong to one party, while the deeper terms of it belong to another. I've started thinking of it less as my house with an occupant and more as a shared property with a specific set of coexistence requirements. The way some properties come with easements or shared walls or access rights that weren't your negotiation but are your responsibility to maintain. I didn't negotiate the arrangement. Pelham negotiated it, or whoever owned the house before Pelham did, with something that has been in this attic since before the house existed, or since the house was built around it, or since it moved into the space the house provided. I don't know which, and I've found that I'm not sure it matters. What matters is the bowl in the cleared space, filled on schedule, maintained in good faith. I went up last week to refill it and stood in the cleared space for a moment before I went back down, something I don't usually do. I stood there in the attic among the boxes and old furniture of previous owners, and I listened, and the attic was quiet around me, and I couldn't tell you with certainty whether the quiet was the quiet of an empty space or the quiet of something very large and very settled, being very still in a space it is always occupied. I went back downstairs. I filled the bowl. That's the arrangement, and it works. And the house is mine in all the ways I can reasonably lay claim to. Most days that feels like enough.